Parents who tried their best to raise their kids to be good humans but they turned out to be jerks. What do you wish you did differently? You don't have to win every power struggle. I don't have jerk kids. But I do think I've learned a lot from having 4 very different kids, and I think too many parents won. Think the same strategies work for all kids, i.e., rule consequence behavior falls in line, rinse and repeat, and 2. Focus on the behavior rather than the cause. If you have a kid who doesn't respond to your parenting style, philosophy, you should rethink your approach. It's not all the kid's fault. Some kids will burn their lives to the ground to make a point. I have one like that. For too long, it was a vicious cycle of kid acts out, I punish. Kid is angry, acts out more. I punish harder. Kid is angrier, acts out even more. I punish even harder. And on and on and on and on. Something needs to break the cycle. For instance, if your kid is challenging your authority, it's usually a bid for more independence. They're trying to be more mature, and they want your adult respect. You don't have to excuse the bad behavior. Consequences are okay. But you also have to look for ways to help your kid get that need met. You don't have to tie it to the actual incident, so it doesn't look like a reward. Give them more responsibility for themselves. Let him walk to school alone if he doesn't get to do that. Quit bugging him so much about what he does with his free time, even if you think he should be getting more fresh air. Look for any opportunity to let him choose something. We're going to do something as a family on Sunday. You can choose what we do, or where we eat, or whatever. Don't tell him when he has to do his chores. Let him set his Saturday schedule. I need you to mow the lawn and do the dishes today. You can do it any time between now and 6 p.m. If you address the cause of the behavior, it's going to do way more to correct a bad behavior, and you'll also get more respect from your kid. If you insist on winning every power struggle, your kid is going to see everything as a fight. Edit. I need to give my wife credit for helping me understand this over the years. She's not only a great mom and wife, she's also a really good therapist. She's gained a lot of perspective working with other kids and parents and working on those relationships. As a parent with a sometimes challenging kid, I greatly appreciate this comment. I will screenshot it and save it for later. My kid has ADHD, as do I, and I've so learned the value of approaching him from where he is at in the moment. Generally speaking, if you try to teach your kid something and not be the example, you might as well not have wasted your time. The best field anthropologist in the world is a kid watching the grown-ups. Do what I say, not what I do. All that does is grow my spite. Edit. I understand addiction and struggling issues, but don't use it as a justification of your actions. This also includes admitting to being wrong and apologizing to your kids when you haven't been the best example to them. And understanding that, everyone, should need to do this at some point, because no one is perfect and raising a child isn't something you can do perfectly. If you present yourself as perfect to your kids and hide all your errors, no matter how smoothly you manage to do it, they will grow up thinking that authority is infallible, or purely about power, mistakes are inexcusable or rare, and vulnerability is something to be ashamed of. Not me, but my parents have discussed what they wish they had done differently for my brother in order to prevent him from becoming a violent, homeless, drug-addicted snotball of a person. They wish they had sent him to therapy before problems ever started, and that they had reacted quicker and sent him sooner when they did. They wish they hadn't yelled so much at all of us. That they had been more patient and forgiving of our mistakes. They wish a lot. That's sad. I'm sorry. My brother's sister-in-law knew there was something off with her son when he was around 2 to 3. All of the doctors and grandparents were just like, he needs more discipline, etc. That wasn't it. She stuck with it. Turns out he's a sociopath. Luckily it was caught early enough and they could afford all of the psychiatrist, psychologist, group therapy, etc. That he's learned how he's supposed to act in the world. Last I talked to them he was completely off medication and thriving in school. Had to be homeschooled till around 9 to 10. Edit. To everyone questioning his diagnosis, that's the therapy he went through. There's a documentary about it out there I'm sure you can all find with no difficulty. With respect, parents who get this stuff wrong usually lack the perspective to see how they failed. My wife and I raised very good kids, her doing more than mine, for sure. The trick, if you can call it that, is really simple. Follow through. Parents who don't deliver on both threats and promises lose their kids' respect and trust both. The result is a lot of what you describe, i.e., lots and lots of yelling. I'm saying this as the parent who often didn't do this right. Usually, because I wasn't paying attention until I got angry. Consequences don't need to be angry, they only need to be swift and certain, and so do the rewards. The mom of one of the Columbine shooters gave a TED Talk about this. She wrote a book called A Mother's Reckoning about all the signs she missed. I think every parent needs to read this book before their kids hit their teenage years. I've seen that, been a while, but I remember it being heartbreaking. I can't even begin to imagine what it feels like to think you've raised a decent kid, and they then go on a murder-suicide spree that changes history. I have one child, the youngest, who I'm starting to worry about. He's tall, athletic, attractive and very charismatic. I feel like it's a constant battle between teaching him respect and humility and the worship he gets at school. At his age, he's not prepared to deal with all these peers who want his attention, tell him how great he is, and the girls lining up to talk to him. Yeah, don't we all wish we had this problem as teens? Anyway, it's a struggle. He's gotten cocky and thinks life will just keep on treating him like a king. And maybe it will. He's got the type of personality that makes people want him around. But he needs to treat others with the same respect he expects for himself. Confidence is good, but it needs to be combined with kindness. Our other children are very level-headed and what we feel are good people. I hope we get to properly tech this to our youngest and that he takes it to heart and chooses to be a good person. He's gotten cocky and thinks life will just keep on treating him like a king. Different situation, but being effing smart made school a joke. The real world isn't school. Harsh lesson learned there. I wish I knew that some grandparents shouldn't be allowed to have a relationship with a vulnerable, easily manipulated child. I wish I knew it was okay to cut people out of your life. My wife died when my son was 3 months old. Last time my in-laws saw him was at her funeral. I moved, changed numbers and just dropped off the map as far as they knew. Saw how their kids turned out, they weren't getting near mine. My grandma traumatized me after years of emotional abuse. It wasn't anything extremely toxic, but it doesn't take much to mess with a small kid, especially if they're sensitive like I was. I went super low contact with her in my 20s and my relationship with my family is a bit strained because I don't trust my parents on an emotional level. I cried and begged them not to leave me alone with my grandma, but they rarely listened. Overall, they're great parents, but it still sucks that happened. So less of advice on how to make your kid less of a jerk and more how to prevent traumatic experiences. If your kid shows some aversion to a particular family member, ask them why. My mom told me as an adult that she didn't realize how cruel my grandma had been to me until I gave verbatim quotes as a high schooler. I'm speaking as a teacher, but I've seen wildly different siblings. I think parents need to get a handle on that dynamic. A lot of perfectionist older siblings and younger ones who can't achieve at that level and act out instead to find how they can earn attention. Yep. People need to stop treating kids as carbon copies of their older siblings. And I say this as an eldest child who differs greatly in personality and interests from my younger sibling. It's not fair to anyone, least of all the kid who has to deal with being measured by someone else's standard. Everyone is their own person. Even the twins I've known had different personalities and interests if one cared to observe. In my experience, most jerk kids come from jerk parents. That being said, kids can easily become jerks when they have no consequences for their actions. Not just as a toddler but throughout childhood. This is true. But I noticed when my kids were in elementary school that so many of them had the nicest parents, and yet their kids were utter brats. I did find out later, a lot of the parents were in fact jerks. Just knew the societal norms to which they were supposed to conform. We wanted our kids to be happy, so I think we coddled and spoiled them. They aren't ready to function independently in the adult world. In retrospect, I think learning some hard lessons growing up helps prepare them and is less damaging than learning those lessons as adults. Edit. To clarify, they aren't jerks, just not ready to be adults. Yes, this is super important. Parents need to let their children fail and work their way through things. I had an ex whose parents removed every obstacle in his way and took care of everything for him. As an example, He was very smart and did well academically. When we had a strict teacher who gave us all bad grades on our first paper, rightfully, we had lots of room to improve, and gave us the opportunity to rewrite it. They met with her to contest the grade and made her cry. He never worked on getting better. He got to college, and when he didn't immediately get all A's and thrive in every way, he had a mental breakdown. I also had to teach him basic things like how to use a can opener. I hope he's learned how to handle failure and struggle better since then, but the lack of resilience they instilled in him was just sad and harmful. Currently pregnant and acutely scanning this thread to take note of what not to do. Check out the book How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes. In my opinion, the one defining characteristic of bad parents is being resentful of their own children. Resentful that they took some of their freedom, resentful of their youth, resentful of their opportunities. As well as resentful of their intelligence, resentful of their beauty, resentful of their possessions, resentful of their education, resentful of their accomplishments, resentful of their happiness, etc. I think this is far more common than most people realize. These parents may consciously provide for their kids while they unconsciously sabotage them. The kids pick up on this and end up aspiring to their parents' unspoken expectations. Good parents want their kids to exceed their own achievements and, most importantly, to be happy. Good parents are empathetic to their children. They're happy when their kids are happy. They're sad when their kids are sad. Resentful parents don't really want their kids to be happy unless they credit the parents for their happiness. No achievement belongs to the kids, but every failure does. Holy shit. This is my mom. She was a teen mother and never owned up to regretting her decision, but it came out in her contempt for me. If I wasn't popular enough, I was disappointing, but if my teachers bragged about me, she seemed annoyed. The constant comments about her body versus mine. The contempt was in everything she did, but she would make a big show of us being besties. We haven't talked in 7 years, and going NC was like coming up for air. My father was adamant that my siblings and I wait until our late 20s at least to have kids. My parents had the first of us at 19, unplanned, and while we've never doubted that they love us, and he's never said it out loud, I do know my dad regrets having that responsibility dropped on him so young. Be very careful who you have kids with. If I could do it all over again, I would have chosen better. They ended up with one responsible parent who was completely overwhelmed trying to do the job of 2 people. My parents. My mom was hyper-involved while my dad immediately detached the minute we stopped being cute and started having opinions. I see him doing it to his grandkids now. Mom put us in every event, sport, extracurricular. Dad never attended and often had no idea what we did with our time. Mom pushed us to excel academically, and we often were doing super high-level classes. Dad assumed we were lazy because we were often tired and didn't have jobs. Hard when you have a double class load as a high school freshman. Dad was also pretty verbally abusive, to me, at least. Mom knew we had a negative relationship but never pried and never got involved. She doesn't know how far it went, to be fair. Which also sucked. I think my mom would have been an awesome parent if she had an equal partner, but instead we had an absentee and someone too involved in being everything to actually listen to what was going on. I doubt you're going to get good faith answers from parents on this. My parents would tell you, well, my dad died a few years ago, but he believed this when he was alive, that I turned out terribly. I'm married to a guy the first love, raising kids who are reasonably well adjusted, and doing a job I like, living in a nice house with friends and hobbies I love. They don't like the way I dress, don't like the way I wear my hair, don't like my friends, don't like the denomination of synagogue I go to, don't like my career path, and are angry that I'm fat and don't dye my hair. My dad was particularly put out by the fact that my son has long hair and my daughter likes cosplay. Also, they'll say they did a perfect job at raising me and I'm just a failure. Yay, most people aren't smart enough to realize they're just projecting their own wants and needs onto their kids. Like the children are only successful if they fulfill the parents' warped concept of what success is. Like happiness is objective and there's one way to achieve it. Do exactly what I did. People, and especially parents, are terrified when their preconceived notions of how things work are threatened by people taking different routes in life. I worked with youth for a while in a poorer rural part of America, and in my anecdotal experience there are two types of kids that can turn into bad humans. 1. They've just had tough lives and no good role models. If you get to know them, you realize they are just normal kids that have never been given the tools, opportunity, or encouragement to act any different. If no one figures out how to intervene, it becomes a pattern of life for them that spirals out of control. 2. Kids that never suffer the consequences of their actions. They tend to have really nice caregivers who have a knack for getting their kids out of trouble. When I say they don't suffer consequences, I mean literally. Their parents do their homework, their parents lie for them, their parents don't ever tell them no. Their caregivers also don't supervise them, but whenever anything happens they are easily manipulated by their child. Then take whatever their child says as gospel truth without question. And although the parents don't supervise their children, they seem all too willing to give them everything their child asks for. Within the confines of their economic class. The caregivers are somehow both emotionally neglectful but also always there to help their child out of a jam. In a way that feels like they want to be manipulated by their child. Kids in the first category will do something bad and you go, how could they be so stupid? When kids in the second category do something bad, your reaction is, it's only a matter of time before they kill someone. I knew a lot of young adults that got in trouble with the law, but it was only people from category 2 that got tried for murder and manslaughter. Ugh. We talked to our son about everything under the sun. We had an open forum. We talked extensively about money management, sexuality, dating, how to treat other people, drug use, alcoholism and its consequences. He and I also watched a ton of documentaries together on all of the above topics. I have a thing for shows like Underground Inc., Drugs Inc., Broken, and miniseries like Dopesick. Once he turned 18, he began to do literally everything we advised against. It's been a hard few years. After losing his GF, losing his job and spending some time in jail, I think he's starting to listen. He's been doing a very good job lately. We love him and we support him despite how hard it's been. I feel bad even typing this. It's really tough to look back and legitimately say what could have been done differently. What I can say to coming parents is, don't give up on your kid. Do the best you can. You can't control everything. As a 23-year-old ex-addict kid, I just want to say, my parents aren't why I fucked up. My parents were extremely loving, extremely supportive, and extremely knowledgeable. I suffered from a mix of trauma in my life from other places, genetic addiction potential, and innate, randomly developed mental illness. I just hope you don't blame yourself too much. Sometimes we just mess ourselves up, no matter how present and attentive our parents are. Ultimately, I recovered thanks to them. I wouldn't be here at all if they hadn't housed me while recovering, supported my efforts, and showed me continual love. Not my kid, but a kid I grew up with. His parents were super strict and this kid was one of the most religious people I've ever met. He was in church pretty much any time the church was open. Was a great guy and a really good person, but very odd because of his parents. He was the one always getting made fun of, etc. I found out recently that he was arrested a few months ago on child PRN charges, which absolutely blows my mind. I never would have thought that coming from him. I dunno. But maybe if his parents hadn't been so strict and controlling, he would have turned out differently and been a little more well-adjusted socially. Edit. Just for all the people assuming he was abused at church, it's very unlikely, although not impossible. I also grew up going to that church before my parents got divorced when I was a teenager and I stopped going altogether, though I never went as frequently as he did. There wasn't any abuse going on that I was aware of, and the pastor was a great guy who I still respect to this day despite no longer believing in church much. Like I said, I can't say 100% for certain, but I seriously doubt anything like that happened to him there. When I was a kid, the other kids that were the sons and daughters of clergy were always the worst. One of the saddest things I've ever read is about Elliot Rodgers' parents. I'm sure they made mistakes, but they saw it coming. He, Elliot's father, recalls with a twinge of regret the what could have been moment when Elliot's alarmed mother called police on her son, but they left after Elliot convinced them that his online rantings were harmless. At that point, Elliot had already purchased 3 guns and had been practicing at a firing range in preparation for his retribution. IIRC, his parents sent him to therapy for years, but they couldn't force him to go once he turned 18. It seems like they tried everything they could, and their son still ended up being a mass murderer. I guess I'm that shithead kid. My parents were incredibly strict and controlling, and my parents didn't practice or express unconditional love. I had to earn my place with them. My mother is very religious, to the point of absurdity. If I ever wanted to express myself in a way that was slightly nonconformist, it was a huge problem. My father just wanted to watch TV, smoke cigs, and be left the fuck alone. They made me spend my free time as a teenager working because if my dad had to go to work, so did I. I was incredibly rebellious until about 17 when I realized I was at the end and would be free soon. I just put my head down and took their criticizing and bullying until I got to walk out their door free. My childhood was pure punishment and my home was a prison. I left home and I was just like a not well socialized person, and my sense of self was always negative. I used lots of drugs and alcohol and created problems for myself. I had a survivor mindset. I had to do whatever I had to do to survive because I just couldn't go back home. The world really beat me down and put me in my place. I have a lot more humility now. I'm kind of a broke loser, but I work all the time. I don't think I'll ever thrive in a material sense, but getting some peace of mind and perspective has made me appreciate my situation. For what it's worth, I have no children, just to be clear. I think kids need unconditional love from their parents. They should be held accountable for mistakes, but they're humans and some mercy for their misgivings is required. You should probably do more to culture their kids than just expose them to church and labor. Maybe take them to a museum or something. And you should probably not punish them for having their sense of self and expression. But I'm skeptical that even the most well-intentioned person can break the cycle of misery and working-class drudgery. Don't be overly strict. Love, 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 and love some more. Love doesn't mean no consequences or discipline, but actually the opposite. Let them learn from relatively safe natural consequences. And then, love them unconditionally and be there for them when the natural consequences happen. Then let go and realize they are ultimately on their own journey.